Marcus Johnson's body was cold when they found him in the basement of Lincoln High School. The 16-year-old lay curled up behind old gym equipment, his brown skin bruised, his school backpack torn open beside him. 3 days earlier, he had finally stood up to the bullies who had tormented him for months. As the morning sunlight filtered through the dusty basement windows, the school janitor stood frozen, his hand trembling on the light switch. But Marcus wasn't dead. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a story that would shake the entire school to its core. 2 weeks earlier, Marcus walked through the halls of Lincoln High with his head down, trying to be invisible. It never worked. Being one of only 5 black students in a school of 300 made invisibility impossible. "Hey, chocolate boy." Tyler Matthews' voice rang out. The star quarterback and his friends blocked Marcus's path to English class. "Did you do my homework?" Marcus clutched his backpack tighter. I couldn't. I had my own work." Tyler's face darkened. He grabbed Marcus's collar, shoving him against the lockers. "What did you say?" The hallway fell silent. Other students pretended not to see, hurrying past with averted eyes. Marcus felt the cold metal pressing into his back and saw the hatred in Tyler's blue eyes. "I said no." Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're getting brave, huh?" He released Marcus's collar but leaned in close. "Meet me after school, behind the gym. We'll see how brave you really are." Marcus spent the rest of the day in a fog of fear. His hands shook so badly in chemistry that he dropped his test tube. At lunch, he couldn't eat. His only friend, Sarah Chen, noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, sliding into the seat beside him. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing." "Marcus." Sarah's dark eyes were serious. "I saw Tyler this morning. What did he do?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed. An anonymous message. "You think her tough? Wait till after school." Sarah grabbed his phone, reading the message. Her face paled. "Marcus, you need to tell someone. Principal Stevens." "No." Marcus took his phone back. "That'll just make it worse." The final bell rang at 3:15. Marcus stood at his locker, heart pounding. He could run home, but they'd find him tomorrow, or the next day. His father's words echoed. "Stand up for what's right, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." Marcus walked toward the gym, his legs feeling like lead. Tyler and 5 of his friends waited in the shadow of the building. When they saw Marcus approach, their grins widened. "Look who showed up," Tyler sneered. "Ready for your lesson?" Marcus stopped 10 feet away. His whole body trembled, but he forced himself to look Tyler in the eye. "I'm not doing your homework anymore, and I'm not letting you push me around." Tyler's grin vanished. Wrong answer. He stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. But before he could reach Marcus, a voice rang. "What's going on here?" Coach Reynolds rounded the corner of the gym. The bullies scattered instantly, leaving Marcus alone and shaking. "Everything okay, son?" Coach Reynolds asked. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. But as he walked home that day, he knew nothing was okay. This wasn't over. He had no idea how right he was. That night, Marcus received another anonymous message. "Tomorrow, lunchtime, the basement. Come alone or everyone sees the video." Marcus stared at his phone, cold dread settling in his stomach. What video? He clicked the attached file, and his blood turned to ice. Someone had filmed him in the locker room after gym class, edited with racist slurs and T-Hreets. If this got out, the message blinked again. 12:30, basement, alone, or everyone sees it. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. The video and Tyler's sneering face played repeatedly in his mind. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes. "You look terrible," Sarah said when she saw him at his locker. "Did something happen after school yesterday?" Marcus wanted to tell her everything about the confrontation, the video, the threat, but the message had been clear. Come alone. I'm fine, he lied. Just didn't sleep well. Sarah frowned. Marcus, I said, I'm fine. The words came out sharper than he intended. Sarah stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. Before he could apologize, she turned and walked away. The morning classes dragged by in a blur. In history, Marcus caught Tyler staring at him with a smirk. Someone slipped a note in math onto his desk. Tick-tock. At 12:25, Marcus told his English teacher he felt sick and needed the bathroom. Instead of heading to the cafeteria, he walked down the basement stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The basement was dark and musty. Old sports equipment and broken desks created shadows everywhere. Marcus's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Hello? His voice trembled. Right on time. Tyler stepped out from behind a stack of chairs, but he wasn't alone. 4 other boys emerged from the shadows, surrounding Marcus. What do you want? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tyler held up his phone. Delete the video? Sure. But first, he cracked his knuckles. You need to learn your place. Marcus backed away but hit the wall. 5 against 1? Real brave. Shut up. Tyler's face twisted with rage. You think you can talk back to me? You think you belong here? He shoved Marcus hard. This is our school! Something snapped inside Marcus. Years of fear, trying to be invisible and swallowing his pride, it all boiled over. No! He shoved Tyler back. This is my school too. I have every right to be here. For a moment, Tyler looked shocked. Then his face darkened with fury. Get him! They rushed Marcus all at once. He dodged the first punch, but a second caught him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping. Kicks rained down from all sides. Through the pain, Marcus heard the basement door creak open. Hey! A familiar voice shouted. Stop! The beating paused. Marcus looked up through swollen eyes to see Sarah standing at the bottom of the stairs, her phone held high. I'm recording everything, she said, her voice shaking but determined. And I just pressed send. The whole video is already uploaded to the cloud. Tyler stepped toward her menacingly. Give me the phone. Back off! Another voice called from the stairs. Coach Reynolds appeared behind Sarah, his face thunderous. Everyone freeze! But Tyler and his friends were already running, shoving past the coach and disappearing up the stairs. Marcus tried to stand, but the room spun. The last thing he saw was Sarah rushing toward him before everything went black. When he woke briefly, he was being moved. Unfamiliar voices spoke above him. Then darkness again. Hours passed in a haze of pain and confusion. Sometimes he heard footsteps and voices, but he couldn't move, couldn't call out. It would be 3 days before the janitor found him. 3 days that would change everything at Lincoln High forever. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness in the hospital. White walls, beeping machines, and his parents' worried faces blurred together. The doctors said he had 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and severe bruising. But they couldn't explain why he'd been found 3 days after the attack. I don't understand, his mother said, gripping his hand. Sarah and the coach saw what happened. Why didn't anyone find you sooner? Marcus tried to remember. The beating, Sarah appearing, Coach Reynolds, then running footsteps, darkness, and something else. Something important hovering just beyond his reach. Detective Rivera sat beside his bed, notebook ready. The security cameras in the basement hallway were disabled that day, and Coach Reynolds says when he went back down after calling the office, you were gone. Everyone assumed you'd left. But I didn't, Marcus whispered. Someone moved me. The detective leaned forward. What do you remember? Marcus closed his eyes. Fragments came back, being lifted. A familiar voice saying, put him behind there. The smell of cleaning supplies. I think there was more than one person. While Marcus recovered, Lincoln High exploded in chaos. Sarah's video of the attack went viral. News vans camped outside the school. Students held protests demanding Tyler and his friends be expelled. But Tyler and his gang had disappeared. Their parents claimed they were visiting relatives out of state. The police couldn't find them. Principal Stevens held an emergency assembly about racism and bullying. Teachers attended sensitivity training. The school board launched an investigation, yet something felt wrong. When Marcus finally returned to school 2 weeks later, students whispered behind his back. Not just about the attack, about the missing days. "It doesn't make sense," Sarah said as they sat in the library. "Coach Ray, Nolds saw them run away. But when he came back down, you were gone." "How?" Marcus rubbed his still tender ribs. "Someone must have moved me while the coach was calling for help. But why keep me there for 3 days?" Sarah's eyes widened. Unless they wanted you found." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. If they'd just beaten you up and left, it would have been bad. But finding you 3 days later, barely alive, that turned it into a massive scandal. The school can't ignore it now." Marcus felt cold. "You think someone planned this?" Before Sarah could answer, his phone buzzed. An anonymous message. "Meet me in the journalism room after school, alone. I know what really happened." Marcus showed Sarah the text. "It could be a trap." "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "No." Marcus stood up. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. This time I'm getting answers." But as he walked to the journalism room that afternoon, Marcus had no idea he was about to uncover a conspiracy far beyond simple bullying, one that would shake Lincoln High to its foundations and change his life forever. The door creaked as he pushed it open. The room was dark except for a single computer screen, glowing in the corner. A figure sat with their back to him. "Close the door," a familiar voice said. Marcus's blood ran cold. He knew that voice. It belonged to the last person he'd ever expected to be involved in this. The chair turned, and Marcus gasped. Principal Stevens sat at the computer, his familiar kind smile gone. In its place was something cold and calculating. "Sit down, Marcus," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Marcus's legs felt like lead. You were part of this? Part of it?" Stevens laughed. "I orchestrated it. Every detail. The video, the basement, all of it." "But why?" "Because sometimes the system needs a push." Stevens turned the computer screen toward Marcus. "Look." News headlines filled the screen. "Racial attack rocks local high school." "Education board launches investigation into systemic racism." "School district overhauls anti-bullying policies." "For years, I've tried to change things through proper channels," Stevens continued. "Diversity initiatives, sensitivity training, policy reforms. Nothing worked. The board ignored me. Parents complained about political correctness. But now?" He gestured at the screen. "Now they have to listen." Marcus felt sick. "You used me. You let them hurt me." "I protected you," Stevens snapped. "My people were watching. If things went too far, they would have stepped in. After the attack, we kept you sedated in a safe place until the timing was right. The medication should have worn off completely by now." "Your people?" Marcus's head spun. "Who else is involved?" "People who want change. Teachers, parents, community leaders. We've been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment. When you stood up to Tyler, we knew it was time." "You're insane," Marcus whispered. Stevens leaned forward. "Am I? Look at what's happening. The school board is finally taking racism seriously. Tyler and his friends will be expelled. Their parents, some of the biggest opponents of integration, are humiliated. And you're a symbol now, a catalyst for change." "I never asked to be a symbol. No one ever does." Stevens's voice softened. "I chose you, Carefew." "Lie, Marcus. Strong enough to survive, brave enough to stand up, smart enough to understand the bigger picture. This was never just about you. It's about every minority student who will come after you." Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over. I'm going to the police. With what evidence? Sarah's video only shows Tyler and his friends. The security cameras were disabled. The medication we used is untraceable. Your word against mine, and I'm the respected principal who's been fighting for minority rights for 20 years. Marcus reached for his phone. I wouldn't, Stevens said calmly. Remember that video Tyler had? We made it. We have others, much worse ones. Your family could be destroyed. Before Marcus could respond, voices echoed in the hallway. Stevens quickly closed the news articles on his computer. Think about what I've said, he murmured as footsteps approached. You're part of something bigger now. The journalism room door opened. Sarah stood there with Coach Reynolds. Marcus? Sarah's eyes darted between him and Stevens. Everything okay? Marcus looked at his principal, the man who had orchestrated his torture for a supposed greater good. Stevens's expression was perfectly pleasant, concerned, and grandfatherly. Just checking on our brave student, Stevens said warmly. Making sure he's readjusting well. Marcus felt the weight of impossible choices crushing him. Tell the truth and risk everything? Stay silent and let Stevens win? Or was there another way? At that moment, he decided to either expose a conspiracy or destroy his life completely. Marcus waited until Sarah and Coach Reynolds left before speaking. You're right, he told Stevens. I am part of something bigger now. Stevens smiled, satisfied. But he didn't know Marcus had pressed record on his phone the moment he'd entered the room. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The recording proved Stevens's involvement, but the principal's threat about other videos haunted him. One wrong move and his family would suffer. He needed allies. But who could he trust? The answer came at midnight, a text from Sarah. Can't sleep. Something weird about Reynolds today. He seemed nervous. Marcus stared at the message. Coach Reynolds had been there both during the attack and after Marcus's conversation with Stevens. Was he part of the conspiracy? The next morning, Marcus arrived at school early. He had a plan, but it was dangerous. If Stevens caught on, everything would fall apart. First, he needed proof of the sedatives. He snuck into the nurse's office during the first period, searching through medical records. There is a new shipment of medication, which was ordered last month. He photographed the records with trembling hands. Next, he needed to find Stevens's co-conspirators. During lunch, he watched the teachers carefully. Some avoided his gaze, others watched him too closely. He made a list, but the real breakthrough came in gym class. Coach Reynolds pulled him aside, looking around nervously. I need to show you something, Reynolds whispered. Meet me in the equipment room after school. Why should I trust you? Because I've been gathering evidence too. Reynolds' hands shook. Stevens, he's done this before, at other schools. I helped him, God help me. But this time went too far. Marcus studied the coach's face. Was this another trap? Before he could decide, the gym doors burst open. Principal Stevens walked in, flanked by two teachers Marcus had not iced watching him. Coach Reynolds, Stevens called out pleasantly. Could we speak privately? Reynolds' face went pale. Of course. As they left, Reynolds dropped a small USB drive into Marcus's hand. Marcus waited until he was alone to check it. The drive contained videos, emails, and documents evidence of Stevens's previous incidents at other schools. Each one follows the same pattern: a racist attack, a missing student, a public discovery, and sweeping changes. But it also contained something else, a list of names. Parents, teachers, community leaders, all part of Stevens's network. Marcus's phone buzzed. An anonymous message. We know what Reynolds gave you. Choose carefully. Attached was a video not of Marcus this time, but of his little sister walking home from middle school. A car followed slowly behind her. Marcus felt the walls closing in. He had the evidence to expose everything, but it wasn't just his family at risk. His sister. The final bell rang. Students flooded the hallways, heading home. Marcus sat in the empty gym, the USB drive heavy in his pocket, his sister's video playing in his mind. Then he heard a scream from the direction of the equipment room. Coach Reynolds' voice was cut short. Marcus ran toward the sound, his heart pounding. The equipment room door was locked, but he saw Reynolds lying motionless on the floor through the window. Behind him, footsteps approached. Marcus spun around. The two teachers who'd accompanied Stevens blocked both ends of the hallway. Behind them, more figures emerged from classrooms' faces he recognized from Reynolds' list. "The USB drive, Marcus," one teacher called out. "That's all we need." Marcus backed against the equipment room door. "What did you do to Coach Reynolds?" "He'll be fine," another voice said. Principal Stevens walked calmly down the hallway. "Just sedated like you were. Can't have him talking to the police, can we?" Marcus's phone felt heavy in his pocket, still recording. He needed to get out, to get the evidence to someone who could help. But his sister, the video of your sister, was just a warning, Stevens said, as if reading his thoughts. "Don't make us turn it into something worse." "This isn't about racism at all, is it?" Marcus said, stalling for time as his mind raced. "It's about power, control." Stevens smiled sadly. "It's about necessary change. Sometimes that requires sacrifice." "Like the other schools? The other students you used?" Stevens's smile vanished. "Reynolds showed you everything, didn't he?" He sighed. "Such a waste. He was with us from the beginning." Marcus heard a groan from inside the equipment room. Reynolds was waking up. "Last chance, Marcus," Stevens said. "The USB drive, now." Instead, Marcus pulled out his phone. "I recorded everything. Our conversation earlier, and right now. It's already uploaded to the cloud." Stevens laughed. "You really think that will help? Who's going to believe you over all of us?" He gestured at the teachers surrounding them. "We're pillars of the community. You're just a troubled teen who attacked some classmates and got hurt in the process. That's how the new story will go." Marcus's hand tightened on his phone. "You forgot something." "Oh? I'm not alone anymore." Right on cue, voices echoed down the hallway. Dozens of them. Sarah had done her part. While Marcus confronted Stevens, she'd gathered every student she could find, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. They flooded the hallway now, phones raised, recording everything. And behind them, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Police sirens wailed. Stevens' face contorted with rage. "Get those phones!" he shouted. But it was too late. The students had seen Reynolds unconscious and heard Stevens' confession. The truth was out. Stevens lunged for Marcus, reaching for his phone. Marcus dodged, but his back hit the equipment room door hard. The lock broke. He fell backward as the door swung open. Stevens followed him down, hands grasping. They both crashed into the room, landing beside Reynolds' stirring form. In the struggle, Marcus's head struck something metal. The world spun. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was Stevens standing over him, face twisted with fury, raising something heavy above his head. Marcus woke up in the hospital again, but this time was different. His parents weren't alone by his bedside. Sarah was there, along with police officers, reporters, and even the district superintendent. "You did it," Sarah whispered, squeezing his hand. "It's over." The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's recordings, Reynolds' USB drive, and dozens of student videos exposed everything. The police found more in Stevens' office, detailed plans of similar incidents at 3 other schools, lists of co-conspirators, and the sedatives used on Marcus and Reynolds. Stevens and his network had orchestrated racial incidents for years, manipulating communities through fear and outrage. They believed they were forcing necessary change, but they'd become the evil they claimed to fight. The arrests made national news. 17 teachers and administrators, including Stevens, were indicted. Tyler and his friends came forward, revealing how Stevens had manipulated them too, encouraging their racism and bullying for his own purposes. But the real change came from the students themselves. "We don't need violence to fight racism. Marcus told the school newspaper. "We need unity, understanding, real conversations, not staged incidents." Lincoln High transformed. New anti-racism programs emerged, led by students of all backgrounds. The school board implemented real reforms, not just reactive policies. Marcus's story inspired other schools to examine their own practices. Coach Reynolds recovered and testified against Stevens. "I thought I was helping create change," he told the court. "Instead, I became part of the problem. But Marcus showed us there's a better way." 6 months later, Marcus stood on the school stage accepting an award for moral courage. Looking out at the crowd, students, teachers, parents, all united, he remembered his father's words, "Stand up for what's right, even when you're scared." He hadn't just stood up, he'd brought others with him, creating lasting change through truth and unity rather than manipulation and fear. Stevens and his conspirators went to prison. Tyler and his friends underwent counseling and made public apologies. But more importantly, Lincoln High became a model for genuine progress in fighting racism, not through staged incidents and fear, but through understanding, education, and students brave enough to stand up for what's right. As Marcus left the stage that day, Sarah hugged him. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "The change is real this time." Marcus nodded, watching students of all races talking, laughing, and learning together. Real change didn't come from elaborate plots or manufactured crises. It came from people willing to face the truth and work together for something better. The basement where it all started became a meeting place for the school's new Unity Council. And on its wall hung a simple plaque with Marcus's words, "Courage isn't about fighting back. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you stand alone. But if you're brave enough to take that first step, you'll find you're never really alone at all."